Hello, everyone, and welcome back to Auer Time with Crown College head football coach John Auer. Auer Time is a weekly program that gives you, the fans, the opportunity to ask the Crown College coach questions about the Storm, football or sports in general, or just seek the coach's wisdom about life events or whatever may be going on in the world these days. This week, the coach reflects with us upon this past season. He shares his enthusiasm about what he's expecting for next year. He gives us a little insight on what a football move may be, and a mother thanks him and his coaching staff for the incredible service that he and the staff has provided this past season. We want to make a note before we jump into this week's program that during the off-season, the program will air monthly on the first Friday of every month so that fans can keep up to date on what's going on with recruiting and other aspects related around the team. You're also welcome to continue to send in your questions to us. If you have questions you'd like to ask the coach about whatever topic that's going on out there, we'll always be happy to share that with him and give him the opportunity to provide his insights. So let's get right to Auer Time. All right, we're going to welcome back Coach Auer for our closing end of the season review. So first of all, Coach, let's just begin with the last 6 games of the season, 8 points or less. Each game is decided by the 3 losses by 9 points total. So what are some things that you feel need to occur within the program to get and win those kind of games?
Sure. And I would say we also looked at it and said we had 3 games this year that we beat a team that we lost to the previous year, but that also means that we had 3 games that we lost to a team we had beat the previous year. And so that's kind of what's good about our conference is the fact that you have a chance, each and every week, and even the teams at the top, you play well and do it from that standpoint. You got a chance every week you line up and that type of thing. And I think the difference for us is, number one, confidence, confidence in us and winning. I think that comes from lifting, that comes from off season and doing the things where you have confidence coming in because you take a look at 3 of those games and there's 2 plays in each one where, okay, if this happens, it's a different result. Now you could have it the other way too as well in the games that we won. But I would say confidence would be one, and you develop confidence through your lifting and through your off season. You put more into it, and when you get done, you have the feeling of, we're going to go and win this thing. And I think that's part of it too. And we started this on our off season on Monday, and looking at it, I look at it and say, okay, that leads us towards turning the corner of being 4-6 in our conference the last 3 years and being middle of the pack towards turning that and getting above that mark.
Excellent. The final game of the season, you go to Mount Pleasant and defeat Iowa Wesleyan. Your defense holds them to 111 yards passing and generates 3 interceptions. What about that game plan allowed you to have so much success against their passing game?
I would say first we played really well in the secondary. I thought our secondary, I watched it with Coach Sather afterwards, and I think to a T we played, he came up with a great scheme to be able to do it, and then I also think our defensive backs, I thought played really well, played with confidence, and went and made plays. When they were given the opportunity, made breaks on the balls and did the things that we've been asking of them. And so, while there was a lot of pressure too as well, I think, you look across the board in the secondary, I think they knew knew what coverages we were in, knew what routes they were running, and they were able to play with some confidence and do it.
Brandon McCormick had a huge day in his final game as a Crown College Storm quarterback. Share with me your thoughts about how you felt that he's grown with the team.
Yeah, I would say it's pretty cool to see him how he ended the year. He had the injury coming in 3 games before the end and fought through it, and you could tell that it was bothering him. And then he kept working at it, kept going to see Karen, our trainer, and getting therapy on it and working on it from that standpoint. But even more so, it's just that confidence. We went to some no-huddle stuff that last game and scored on both the drives that we did that from, and that comes from his leadership and what he does with us offensively. And so I would say that would be a big thing for him. He's always known the stuff and done the stuff, and been able to explain it to us. And I think when he did that last week, he put it into action and took control of the offense and just let him. And again, I think the guys stopped thinking and started just believing in Brandon and just following his leadership.
At this point, who would you determine to be your offensive and defensive MVPs from this past season?
We actually we vote for, our team votes for awards, and then we have a plaque in our office that we work on too as well. And so from their standpoint, they voted offensively, they voted Brandon to be our offensive MVP. I think there was a few guys that were worthy of that to be able to have. We had some receivers that had really good years. I know Edlin had a really good year at running back, and then Mashad did a great job having to switch over to some fullback, some tailback, and and kind of taking on that servant role of doing something that's outside of his comfort level. But I think across the board, especially offensively, a lot of guys stepped up throughout the year. But I think Brandon did a good job, especially finishing it out the right way. Then defensively, Jalen Phoenix was voted our MVP of our defense. Again, same case. We had a couple defensive backs, a couple defensive linemen that were up for all conference and those type of things. And so this year, probably more than ever, it was more spread out. Usually in past years, we've had one or two guys that have kind of decided between one of those two guys. This year was, there was 3 or 4 on each side of the ball that had the opportunity to be that person. And so I think that bodes well for us in our future of having it more spread out rather than, like last year defensively, our 2 main guys were defensive linemen and then graduated afterwards. Now we return a lot of those guys, and again, it's spread out by position on who would be considered in that MVP voting.
So looking forward to next season, the core of your defense with Jalen and Chris Strange, Tyler Bird, among others, you really have a very young group ready to take it to the next step. So you have to be pretty excited about the opportunity for next year.
Yeah, I would say that leads us into it is just that concept of, you have 8 or 9 starters on both sides of the ball that come back. That leads towards, in recruiting, we're always, in our recruiting process, people say, are you recruiting certain positions? And I say, we're always recruiting everybody just to get our numbers up so that we have it for 2 deep, so we have it for scout team and inside of that. But it's kind of nice because, there's a few spots here and there that we're trying to, as opposed to, there were some major position things over the last couple of years that we had to fill from that. And we have a lot of returning guys that were on the second string that could move into those roles. And so you're right, it is good to be in this position where we have a lot of guys returning off of a group that, like you said before, competed the last 6-7 weeks and we're in every game and had that exposure towards fourth quarter having to make plays in order to have success.
So you have only 7 seniors that are graduating this year. Obviously, a majority of your team will be back for next year. How do you take that from being, you easily could have been 8-2 this season. So how do you take that from being a 4-6 team to an 8-2 team with this group now?
I think that's what uses motivation. I talked about it. It felt good to win our last game while we're in Iowa, but I also talked about the fact of, guys, we're better than what we finished off the year being. And while I feel good about how, winning that last game, we've got to do something that changes that from that perspective. And so, whether that's putting more into, you got to look at everything, putting more into our off-season things or doing things differently in your off-season, whether that's with the players or whether that's in coaching or scheme or those type of things. You got to look at some little things here and there that causes you to get over the edge. And I'm a firm believer that, if you keep doing the same thing over and over, you're going to get the same results. Well, there's a lot of things that I would like to keep the same, but then there's a lot of things that I'd like to see different. So we've got to look and say, okay, how can we got to get better on special teams? There's a lot of struggles we had on special teams this year. Well, a couple things you can do with that is we got to get better at our number 2s. Who are usually on special teams, so we have to make sure we recruit in that area in order to have those guys that play those special teams. And I think that's what you do is you look at, if you're a competitor, you look at it and say, how do we change those 3 or 4 games that could have been a different way?
So looking forward to next season now, with Brandon graduating, what's your quarterback position look like for you for next year?
Well, we have a couple. We have Ryan Centerground, who started 4 games the previous year. He started 1 game for us this year and had success doing that. Then we have Luke Lang, and then Seth Allen, who played some tight end for us, which we're excited about how he played tight end. Could also do it too as well. And those 3 guys, plus we're going to go out and we're going to add 2 quarterbacks to it. Hopefully an older one, maybe a transfer, and then also a freshman to the mix. The more, and this goes for any position, the more competition you have at it, the harder you practice, the harder you lift, the more you put into it. And so that's our next step as a program, is having the ability to have 2 guys at each position that compete during the week in practice to see who's going to play on Saturday. And then on Saturday with us being comfortable with the idea of being able to play both.
You talked about Matt and Josh and how they've been an outstanding quality group for you there at the running back position. So how do you think they benefit whoever becomes quarterback next year?
Well, I think you always, it's just like the Vikings have with people's stuff in the box because of the fact you can't do this or you can't do that. It's the same thing. If we have the capabilities of spreading people out, we saw that at the end of the year when we spread people out and we did our no huddle stuff or 2 minute, either one of those two things, that helped us from that standpoint. And so the ability to be able to throw and run, people always say, well, because you're more of a running team, when it's windy out or raining out, you guys benefit. No, we have to be able to do both. And I think having both those guys back, and then also adding Pardee back, who we found this year, we said he might be our offensive MVP. He got hurt in week 2 and was our fullback, and we had to change a lot of things in our offense because of how important he was to what we did. And getting him back for a 5th year is a huge thing for us. To be able to do that. But we return receivers, but we also have some great second team guys that can move into it. And so that quarterback position for us offensively is a huge thing, and we'll be open for competition to see who's going to step up and lead our offense.
At this point, you probably can't give me names of people specifically, but can you tell us a little bit about how recruiting is going and how excited you are about what's happened so far?
Yeah, I would say we're about a week and a half into it, going to see kids in their high school. We have a visit day December 5th where we bring a group. Usually it's about 12 to 15 guys in, and another one in January. We each have Coach Hayes and Coach Sather and myself each have our own area. So we each take usually 2 or 3 days of the week where we're away from Crown and go out and visit kids. I'm leaving Thursday after my class to go to Wisconsin to see some kids, and I know those guys each have trips. One's heading up north this week for a couple days, and so we're kind of, we've had conversation with all these kids on the phone, and now it's time to go see them face to face. And then the next step will be bringing them in for a visit, usually with their parents and doing this. And so that's a process that we're going through over the next month, and we'll go do home visits and things like that. It's interesting to see the difference between male and female athletes. Guys in football right now, a lot of those, they're at the beginning process of doing things, whereas my daughter's a senior in high school right now. She's done and figured out what she's doing and stuff, and so it's just opposite. And sometimes they feel bad. That's just the nature of how it is. And so, we're trying to get kids to get their applications in now and get everything finalized and get everything done for a visit. But right now, it looks good right now from that standpoint, and a certain type of kid we're recruiting, and we're trying to narrow our list down because of who they are and who we want to have in our program.
I'm curious, do you find yourself competing with some of the same coaches in the conference here for the same kind of players? Or?
Yeah, I would say more, you got Bethel and Northwestern, which are the same type of school as Crown. I would say more of that. You do have a little bit of overlap in the conference and those type of things from it. And what we always preach to our coaches that go out and recruit is we're going to talk about the good things about Crown. I'm not big about talking about other schools and this, because across the board there's some good schools out there, and I want to talk about who we are, what we're about, and if that kid fits for those needs, then he's probably going to be good for us to have. And the more we do that, the more positive it is, and the more positive results we get.
Excellent. Heading into our fan questions this week, we begin with Jeremy from St. Cloud, who would like to know, what are some differences that you found between coaching at St. Cloud and here?
It's good question. I always get good questions from fans. I would say a big thing, and I talk about this all the time, is I'd say Crown is a little more relational from a coaching standpoint. I love the football aspect of St. Cloud, and I enjoyed the competitiveness. I enjoyed, back then we played North Dakota State. All those teams were in the same conference, and so, your Saturday afternoon atmosphere was pretty cool. But the thing that was a little bit taken back was the fact that it was all football. There wasn't a ton of personal development, those type of things. Whereas here at Crown, we're working on their faith, working on their academics, working on just general living their lives the right way and doing those type of things. And so I would say that would be a big difference. Time-wise, probably a little bit less, but not as much from that standpoint. And in recruiting, it's just a different beast from that standpoint. We were recruiting less kids at St. Cloud because he had to narrow down because of skill level. Whereas here, we have a wide list of, each one of us has about 100 kids, so 300 that will eventually narrow down to 30 that we each recruit pretty hard, which will then be narrowed down to 10 that we actually get each. And so, you're being told no by 270 of those kids. And so, again, there's a huge difference between each aspect of recruiting, of coaching, of player development between St. Cloud and being at Crown.
I take it this that coaching then for you is just as much about being a good salesperson as
Yep.
it is about coaching
Yep,
at the X and Ls.
And again, I think that's part of it too, is just that idea of, we talk about that fact that we're different. And I always tell kids, if you want to go to a place and just play football, Crown's probably not the right place for you. But if you want to go and grow as a young man and develop as a young man, probably the right place for you. And there isn't anything wrong with either one of those two. It's just finding those kids that want that and making sure those kids see who we are and want to have that when they get here.
Coach Mike from Hudson would like to know, what are some of the fundamentals you stress with your team?
I don't think that changes. I was looking at I'm doing an internship with a young man who's doing a hockey internship for youth. And he was talking about the different drills that he's doing for skating and things like that. And for us, again, your skills are exactly the same. Being able to tackle the right way and doing tackling drills and things like that on defense. Being sound in your steps I coach the offensive line, and working on your steps and working on your hand placement and things like that. So a lot of those things are exactly the same. The big thing for us within our conference and what we found is, we can't turn the ball over. That's huge. On the games that we ended up being +4 in the end in turnovers. So not turning the ball over. And then the other one would be explosive plays. We've got to have the ability to, and that comes from off-season training on speed and strength and doing those things, breaking tackles, or making tackles on the other hand too as well. And so those would be two key aspects of fundamentals or things that we want to make sure that we hold true to, are the turnovers and then also explosive plays.
Do you find that it's hard sometimes that a player coming in, they've allowed at the high school level to not really be fundamentally sound because he just made plays, and now you got to really kind of reinvent him altogether?
You know what we found too? We get some kids from out in Montana that might be like 6, 7, 8-man football, and they've played every position, and it's kind of like backyard football. So all of a sudden now we're going into more structured, where okay, on this play you have this responsibility, you're doing this and this. Those players seem like they have a little bit more time, need a little more time to adjust to college football and the more structure of it. And you see that a lot too. Like we do gap responsibilities and block react up front from our defensive line. And we'll get a lot of times from players, our coach just let me go and make plays, and I didn't have to worry about what gap I had from that. Okay, well, yeah, those are things that we have to overcome and from that standpoint. But there's a lot of kids that come from good high school programs that have good coaching and come into it with the understanding of fundamentals and understanding of scheme as well.
Nice. Craig from Mankato has a question for you. He'd like to know, how do you apply biblical principles to the way that you coach on the field?
Sure. I would say, a big one for us is we use Matthew 15. We talk about dealing with each other. Talk about the concept of another man, again, I'm paraphrasing from it, talks about another man sins against you, go to him face to face and have that conversation. If he listens, you've gained a brother. If not, bring 1 or 2 others with you and have that conversation. And so as a team, that's what we use, whether it's coaches to players, players to each other, and holding each other accountable. And so if I'm a player and I see somebody else doing things against what we think is right or what is right, it's my job to be able to go and confront that person man-to-man, face-to-face. If he changes, good. We've done what we need to do. We've gained a friend. If not, we should bring another, some captains or some leadership guys with it, that type of thing. And then finally, the last one would be come to see me. And if that person's at that point, that person probably needs to be away from football for a little while in order to get things right. And so those would be the concepts of what we use biblically in order to transfer it over to more of a football type setting from that standpoint. And a lot of times people think of Christians as being soft and this and that. There's a lot of toughness to being a person of faith. You have to hold true to your beliefs and hold true to who you are. And so a lot of times it's just talking about that. It's talking about the idea of, I always say this, if you were to play football, he played linebacker and he'd light you up. He'd play within the rules and do those type of things, but there isn't any softness that would come along with it. And so, whether it's dealing with each other personally or whether it's on the field, there's got to be a degree of toughness involved with each aspect.
I think people forget that the Apostle Paul had rocks thrown at him and was run out of virtually every town he had, but he still continued to battle.
Yep, exactly. There's tons of different, we do our chapels and a lot of times those stories are brought up inside of those, before games and those type of things. But there's a ton of toughness involved with it.
Craig also would like to know, how do you blend the forgiveness piece of faith with the demand to be accountable to one's actions on and off the field?
I always say this. I always say if I feel like you are trying, you're making an effort to do things right, I'm willing to work with you. The day that I feel like you don't care anymore and you're not trying to do it, that's when we have to go in a different direction. So sometimes those are the hardest decisions you have to make as a coach is, you get a person that's kind of in between the two things of caring and not caring. And so from our standpoint, I've had a lot of kids that, we've had to go through, we've given a couple chances, but I take a look at it and say, I still feel like that person cares. And I've had others that have been given one chance and you just don't feel like you're getting that and don't feel like this is the right place for them. And so again, those are probably some of the toughest things that you have to go through. But from an accountability standpoint, I always talk about the fact you came here for a certain reason. If you're going to be here, then let's live by those rules and let's live by why we say we came to this place, including myself. And so those are usually pretty good conversations from that standpoint. And usually in most cases, kids are trying to do things right.
Our next question comes from Phil from St. Bonifacius, who asked, I skipped one. I'm sorry. Let me jump back. Jenny from Victoria, who asked, what were the most enjoyable moments for you this last season?
I'd say one of them was going on the road at Westminster, beating a team that we hadn't beaten before, coming off got beat pretty good by Scholastica the week before that, and kind of had the mantra of it's just us on the road that week, and kind of you could see guys starting to believe in each other, starting to believe in what we were doing. That was a pretty good Saturday afternoon, and then getting on the bus and driving home and being able to be with each other during that time. And so I would say that would be one of my favorites. And then also, too, to end the year off and give those seniors that win at the end. I know there's some tough things throughout that game and that type of thing, but there's a lot of positive things from this year and a lot of positive things that our players did throughout the season, and especially to end the year off the right way.
What is it like for those seniors for you to see when they walk off the field, head to the locker room, and then that's it?
Yeah, it's weird because you can kind of see a little bit. We do something at our last practice, and we do something at our last home game, but you can kind of tell at the last, when we go through that line at the end, it kind of hits them that, hey, I'm done, and this is over with, and I can't, football's totally different than anything else. You're not going to go grab a bunch of buddies that are, mid-20s and throw on pads and go play a game. You just can't do it. So it's different than anything else that we do. Other sports, you can continue to at least do some form of that sport. But it's you can see in a lot of them too that the end, but also too that excitement of what do I have next in store for me in my life, and moving on from college and being able to go out in the real world too as well.
Now back to Phil.
Sure.
Coach, that play that Odell Beckham Jr. made, that's got to be a catch, right?
I would go back to the Dallas Cowboys. What's the receiver name for Dallas?
Bryant?
Yeah, the one he caught at Green Bay.
Yeah, Des Bryant.
Des Bryant. Where he's got the 2 feet down, he's reaching towards the end zone, and they say it's not a catch. We've got to have it. I was watching a game on Sunday, and they said we got to get more definitive on what actually is a football move, and saying, do we take 2 steps and that's what it is? And I agree with that concept. I think we got to go look at those rules and say, because right now it's really subjective, and to have to take 2 steps and go to the ground and maintain the ball and to me that's a little bit much. And so I agree with you. I think that was a catch, and I think I think we're overanalyzing some of those things and looking for reasons for it not to be a catch. And so I think we need to go back, that competition committee needs to go back to the drawing board and figure out what actually is a catch in the field of play and what is on the sideline, those type of things too.
As a coach, would you clearly know, could you tell me what a football move was?
Yeah, and I think it's different for each official, and I think it's different for each player and those type of things. That's where you have to get something a little more concrete as opposed to so subjective in what they currently have.
Our last statement comes from Sue from Plymouth, who wanted me to add this into this week's show. She says, Coach, as the mom of a former player, I just want to say thank you for the hard work you put in with these kids. Truly, our sons are better off for having you and your staff in their lives.
That's very nice of Sue to say. I appreciate those facts, and that's why we're here. As great as football is and winning games and doing those things, I like seeing our kids grow up and develop as young men, because I know that's something that's going to last them for the next 40, 50 years of their life, and how much better they can become as a husband or as a father, or even a boss to their employees. To see them grow in that way, and see them when they leave here and be excited about the fact of knowing that they're going to be able to go out and make an impact in the world and do it from a faith perspective and know that they're, from when they came in until when they left, they decided that to buy into us and what we wanted to teach them, and eventually that turned into them becoming a better person.
It's pretty awesome.
Yes, it is.
Coach, thank you for joining us this week.
You bet. Thank you.
We want to thank Coach Auer for joining us on Our Time this week. If you have your own questions you'd like to ask the Crown College coach, please send them to us at johnauer@minorleaguesportsupport.com. That's johnauer@minorleaguesportsupport.com. As a reminder to you, the show will air the first Friday of every month, so please have your questions to us by the Thursday prior to that Friday, just to ensure that we have plenty of time to give the coach to review the questions before we record the show Friday morning. I'm Rob Paneer, the managing editor of the Minor League Sports Report. I want to thank you for joining us each week here on Our Time. I hope during the off-season you will continue to make Our Time part of your time, and we look forward to seeing you each and every week.